Okay, well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Springtime Science Series. This series is a collaboration between Illinois Extension and the Interdisciplinary Health Sciences Institute at University of Illinois, and is designed to connect those across the state with researchers at the university and provide evidence-based educational programming. If you are seeking CEUs or CPDUs, here today. We're going to put a link here in the chat. As you can see that, please go ahead and fill out that form to check in today's webinar. And then you will be receiving a follow-up email with an evaluation that will need to be filled out to finalize your CEU and CPDU process. So my name is Jenna Smith, and I'm a University of Illinois Extension Nutrition and Wellness educator, serving Livingston, McLean, and Woodford counties. As a registered dietitian, I am especially excited to hear today's presentation and find out why do we eat what we eat. So I've got just a couple of housekeeping items to cover before we actually begin. So I would first like to launch a poll, and this poll is going to collect some basic kind of information from all of you. So you can see that pop up in your screen. Once you enter that information, feel free to minimize that off of your screen. And if you have any questions during the program, please go ahead and type them in the chat box. We would love to hear them. If you're calling in, just go ahead and please hold off those questions until the end of the session. And we'll be sure to look through that chat box and go through those questions at the end. So now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker for the series, Ria Sarma. Ria is a first-year master's student in kinesiology and community health at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. She has completed her undergraduate degree in biotechnology from India. Ria is currently working to understand the effect of nutrition knowledge on individuals' dietary patterns and cognitive functions. She is passionate about food habits and overriding existing food behaviors, tricking the brain to eat healthy. And today she will be talking to us about the influence of hedonic eating on mood and emotions. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ria.
Okay. So hi everyone, my name is Ria. So as Jenna introduced me, so I've completed my undergrad degree in biotechnology from India. I'm doing my first and master's in kinesiology and community health at UIUC. Also, I'm gaining interdisciplinary translation research experience in the realms of nutrition, cognition, and behavioral sciences. My research interest mostly is on understanding food behaviors and also nutritional neuroscience. And also, I love eating, so that's why everything revolves around food. Okay, so let's start with the outline for today's presentation. So I'm going to talk about the...
Ria, I'm going to just interrupt you. I'm sorry for just one moment. We have a lot of people a little bit trouble hearing you. It's a little bit faint. I'm not sure if your microphone is working well, but if you could turn that up, that'd be great.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
That is much better. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So sorry guys for that interruption. So I will start again with the outline for today's presentation. So we'll talk about homeostatic and hedonic mechanism of food. We'll also understand the psychology behind food intake, that is feelings and environmental cues. Also, how healthy food is equal to good mood. And also we'll try to defeat the pleasure trap. So I'm going to talk about everything today and also give you some idea about how to take care of your health. Okay, so let's start with the key terms to remember. So before I start with the presentation, I want all of you to understand these key terms because they will appear in the presentation a lot of times. So it's good to understand. So what is homeostatic eating? So basically eating in response to a perceived energy need by brain. So when there's depletion of energy in our body, the homeostatic eating comes into play. Hedonic eating is the desire to consume food for the purpose of the pleasure and also in the absence of physical hunger. So hedonic eating is basically we eat for the pleasure. Energy homeostasis means the balance between energy intake and energy expenditure. And energy dense foods are basically foods having a large number of calories per servings. And nutrient dense foods are basically foods with a high amount of vitamins, minerals, complex carbohydrates, lean proteins, and healthy fats. So these are the key terms, and we will be seeing these terms a lot in today's presentation. Okay, let's start with a very basic question for all of you guys, that why do we eat? So you guys can go and write your answers on the chat box. I will give you some time so that I know what you guys think. Why do you eat? Oh, okay, I see. Yes, okay. I see some great replies on the chat. Okay, yes. So I see to live, to taste, to survive, for the pleasure. These are all right answers actually. So I'll give you a basic understanding of why do we eat. So obviously the first thing is for survival. So people engage in eating behaviors to survive, right? The next is repair. So we eat to repair our tissues and also for cell generation. So that's why we eat. And the last is to provide energy to do day-to-day activity. So these are the basic idea, like the basic concepts. Why do we eat? So going back to our ancestral history, making food choices was easy because the primary goal and the task was to seek out for food which will provide energy and nutrients. But in today's scenario, well, the things have become very westernized. Food is abundant and is readily available. So, we have a lot of options, and these options are easily available to us. So that's why eating can be rather complex to all of us. Okay. So food intake depends on two aspects, that is biological and psychological aspect of eating. So when we talk about biological eating, this is the motivation to eat food when there's a depletion of energy in our storage. Energy storage depletion is there, and that's why we eat food. And this is known as homeostatic eating. We are eating because our energy is not there. There's depletion of energy in our cells. But when you talk about the psychological eating, it is basically we are overriding the homeostatic pathway. That is, we are eating just the desire to consume palatable food in the prospect of the gaining pleasure. And this is known as hedonic eating. So the homeostatic eating is direct control of feeding. We know how much we are eating, and we are eating just because we want energy to do day-to-day work to survive. But hedonic eating is indirect control of feeding. There are psychological aspects and cognitive behaviors that actually leads us to hedonic eating. Okay, so now we will understand what are the factors that actually pushes us to make eating behaviors. So these are the 5 factors that play in, there's an interplay of these 5 factors that leads us to make choices, especially the taste of food. When we eat a food, either it can create a food preference or a food aversion. Either we can like it or not like it. Also the sight of the food, how we perceive the food, is it nutritious, palatable, safe, noxious or not. And smell, like smell acts as a dual sensory modality. So how it depending upon the external world versus the mouth, like how it acts. And also the flavor of the food. So flavor is the combination of the smell and the taste. So that is a physiology. And also resources. So if we don't have time to make food, we go out for a drive through, right, and get the food. And also how cognition, like what are our attitudes towards eating food, also determines our eating behaviors. And also emotions, that's today we're going to talk about, like which foods give us more happiness or makes our mood better. So all these factors are actually pushing us to make our eating behaviors. Okay, so now we'll understand the concept of energy homeostasis. That is, our food intake is actually regulated. So energy balance is the relationship between energy intake and energy expenditure. So essentially, when we eat food, it is actually it's regulated, and it's regulated by a small region in our brain known as hypothalamus, which is just above the thalamus. So how it starts, so when we feel hungry, so when our body is energy depleted, the hypothalamus sends a metabolic feedback. Okay, and this metabolic feedback stimulates our brain and our gut lining to release appetitive hormones, especially examples like ghrelin. So when ghrelin is released, we start feeling hunger. So that's why it is known as appetitive hormones. So then we feel hunger and then we eat the food. So once you start eating the food, the metabolic feedback goes down and the visceral feedback comes up to play. So visceral feedback, it generally is sent to the vagus nerve, and it makes us feel full because there's a release of a hormone named as leptin. So when leptin increases, we feel full and there's a satiety. So that's how the food intake is regulated with the help of hypothalamus. And also, we can see there are parts of hypothalamus that are actually regulating the food intake. So hypothalamus has these three parts, that is VML, LHA, and arcuate nucleus. So VML, which is known as the ventromedial nucleus, is the satiety center, which actually is making us full. Okay. And
Ria, I'm going to just interrupt you one more time. I'm sorry, but your voice is a little bit faint again.
I'll do one thing. Can you guys listen to me now?
Yes, I think that's better.
No?
Yes. Yes, that's louder. Thanks, Ria.
Can you listen to me now?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, I think it's microphone issue. I'm sorry. Okay, so parts of the hypothalamus. So as I said, there are three parts. So the ventromedial nucleus is actually the satiety center that makes us feel full. Okay, there's a sensation of fullness is there. So, and also the LHA, which is the lateral hypothalamic area, is the feeding center. So that gives the simulation of hunger. And how they are both regulated? Because of the arcuate nucleus, which acts like a switchboard. Okay, it's regulating the feeding center and the satiety center. So without this three parts, our food intake regulation can get disrupted. Okay, so yes. Now coming back. So this question is for you guys. So there will be a poll for you. So this great looking pastry. So I just want to know how much this image make you feel hungry. Okay. Okay. So as I predicted that mostly the answers will be a little bit moderately and also in the range of highly and severely and also not at all. So this image is acting like a cue. So it depends on individual context. Some people may feel hunger, some people may not. And we will talk about how psychology of eating help. Okay. See the results here. Okay. So we'll go to the psychology of eating, which is next. So how food behaviors are formed. So in this context, we're talking about food behavior, but any type of behavior formation is depend on this. So going to the base, genes, which is the fundamental unit of our life that carries all the hereditary information. This is all the life processes are run by our genes, which has a genetic code. So therefore, our life experiences depend on the genetic code. Okay. So these genes by default create instincts in our neuronal circuits. Okay. But these instincts are, uh, I would say, very much sensitive to this environmental cues. Environmental cues like when we know there's a danger, either we will attack or defend. If it's cold outside, we will come inside to get some warmth. So that are some environmental cues. So because these instincts are sensitive to environmental cues, so our brain runs some computations and with the neuronal circuits to create a thought. So the concept of thought comes out in this. And later on, these concepts and which the thought is, which makes us to think which is the right move. So feelings are the one that makes us to think and come up with the right move. And these feelings compels us to think and creates a behavior in our systems. So in general, like in altogether, the thought, feelings, and behaviors are working together in a circular form to increase the likelihood of this gene survival. Okay, so these feelings are basically signals. So if we go and ask a psychologist like what feelings are, earlier they didn't know what are these, but recently they have understood these are some signals that are basically based on environmental cues. So environmental cues generate signals in our brain that acts as an evidence of something either good or bad for the likelihood of gene survival. Okay, so that's how it works. So this is the psychology of eating, and also eating depends on these factors. Coming to the in this earth or in this presence of like the existence of an organism. Okay, these feelings are actually driving our motivation behind eating. Okay, so as biological beings, we have been wired through the century to be motivated by three things, that is to seek pleasure, to avoid pain, and to exert the least amount of effort. So all our decisions, all our motivation will be based on these three factors. Okay, and as we go beyond understanding why we eat for pleasure, because pleasure is the main role, pleasure is playing the main major role. So eating of pleasure consists of many brain networks and processes and involves the composite of several components. The several components are liking, wanting, and learning. So liking is basically the reaction to hedonic impact. So when you eat the first bite of a pastry, okay, you like it, right? You have a feeling of nice feeling, and that is because the hedonic impact has started, and there's a slight release of dopamine. Okay, but as we go further, after a point, we have an inclination to that food as a wanting behavior. We want it more. So that motivation is because to gain incentive salience. And incentive salience is basically the motivation for the rewards that is driven by this physiological state and also previously learned association about a food reward. So the reward, and that's what incentive salience is. We know that this food will give me reward, so I want it more. That's what basically it means. And learning. So learning happens all the time in liking and wanting concepts. And Pavlov, we'll talk about it in the next slide, which is the Pavlovian effect. Okay, how environmental cues actually push us to make food choices. Okay, so in this, as you can see, pleasure is playing a major role. So let's talk about the cue induced eating, the concept of classical conditioning by Pavlov. Okay, so classical conditioning is basically learning to associate an experience, in this case, eating, with an environmental cue. So what Pavlov did in his experiment, that is he used to see. So like a dog will always salivate in the presence of food. So in this case, the food is a unconditioned response. Okay, it's the unconditioned stimulus. The unconditioned stimulus always triggers a by default automatic response. And in this case, the dog was salivating. Okay. Now Pavlov actually presents the dog with a neutral stimulus, which is a tone here. Okay. But the dog didn't know what to do, so there was no reaction to it. Now Pavlov thought about it and he said, let's rearrange this experiment. So what he did was during conditioning, he actually presented the tone and the food together to his dog. Okay. And interestingly, he saw one thing, that when the food was removed from the picture and only the tone was played, which is known as after conditioning, the dog started to salivate. Okay. So you can see that that's what classical conditioning is. So the dog actually learned to associate the tone with the food. So the tone is acting like a conditioned stimulus here, and conditioned stimulus is basically which was a neutral stimulus before, but now it is acting as a stimulus that will provide a response. Okay, so the conditioned stimulus, which is CS plus, it's this present and food. So if a conditioned stimulus and a food is present together, there will be a food intake. I can give another example for this. So when we go to a movie theater to watch a film, we always have this thought in our mind that we won't enjoy the movie if we don't have that bucket of popcorn, right? So that bucket of popcorn, you know, is acting like a condition, the cue that is acting as a thing, so which will make our movie experience better. So here the condition stimulus is eating, cue for eating food. Okay, and that's why as we go further, so this condition stimulus can actually depend on individual to individual. Either it can be discrete or contextual. It can be anything, like this environmental cues can be any type. So if you go out with your friends, okay, and you don't actually are not hungry, but you see your friends ordering food, and when they are eating those that french fries or that burger, even you will feel like having one bite of it. Why? Because you see other people eating it, and it is inducing a thing in your head that, yeah, I can have one, what's wrong in that? So here the social context is playing as a conditioned stimulus. Okay, so conditioned stimulus induces a complex emotional or motivation state such as appetite or craving for a target food. Okay, but not for entirely novel food. This conditioned stimulus you won't see mostly in foods that are novel to our system. It is mostly for the foods that you've actually eaten before. Okay. Okay. So going to the next concept, which is hedonic eating, because now you have understand how it all works, the whole concept behind gaining pleasure. So when we talk about homeostatic hunger, I told you we are eating for calories and for pleasure. Obviously, we are getting the calories we want, but we are also getting the pleasure. But a point comes when we just eat for the pleasure. We are not motivated to it. Motivation is not just behind gaining calories, but now we are eating just for the pleasure. So you can understand if you are hedonic eater, if you are always obsessing about overeating a favorite food which makes you feel great. Okay, like it's not the feeling of man, but it's like, wow, it gives me like great feeling. And also you can't stop eating once you start, and also find yourself thinking about these foods throughout the day even if you're not hungry. So that makes you an hedonic hunger, and somewhere you are actually overriding the whole energy intake, the homeostasis of your system. Okay, now I will talk about this beautiful graph here, but I will give you a context. So this graph was actually in a book named The Pleasure Trap, written by Dr. Douglas Leslie. He beautifully actually talked about the concept of, if you know what is right for you, why you can't actually achieve it. Okay, so he actually talked about how food behaviors work and how we humans are in the pleasure trap. Okay, so I will give you a brief idea of how our brain and food both works together. So starting with the phase one. Okay, so this phase one is the whole natural foods category. As humans, like our body, or like we have been designed, nature has designed us to love these foods, and our instincts lies with it. So we eat this food, and we are supposed to love them, and we love them. Okay, we eat this food, the whole natural foods. But when we are introduced to the junk food phase, or you can say energy dense food phase, we love it more because there's a rewarding effect to it. Okay, so as these foods are rich in calorie per bite, we love it, and so there is a lift in our dopamine circuitry and experience. So the individual will feel great and will prefer to stay up there, right? We will, if you reach a greater high, you will always try to be in that high, even if it's cost of a person's few years being overweight, getting sick, but you can't beat the pleasure, right? So that's when you reach the enhanced pleasure zone. Your dopamine circuitry is at another level. You feel great, and it's just beautiful. But you will see an interesting thing. Ah, that is the phase three. So when you come to the phase three, your actually your brain is getting equipped with the intense stimulus. So the brains and the senses are getting dull in order of the high intensity stimulus, and the feelings of high eventually come down to the normal pleasure zone. Okay, this is actually known as the habituation or the neuronal adaptation of any type of behavior. Now the individual is getting the same amount of pleasure, but from energy, super energy rich dense foods. And as you can see, when you are in this phase, people will eat more of the energy dense foods in order to reach the same level of pleasure. And that's why we have lifestyle disorders now, like obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular diseases. Now, finally, finally, as an individual, you understand that I have to get out of this thing. I know it's not right for me. You have someone to guide you out of this thing, and you start with going to the phase four. But coming back to the question that I asked, and that for Dr. Douglas asked in his book, if we know what is right for us, why it is difficult to achieve it. Okay, so when we reach the phase four, okay, it is there's a transition, right? So if you remember, when we go from phase one to phase two, there's a hit in our dopamine circuitry. But now coming from phase three to phase four, your motivational instincts, which are revolving around pleasure, avoid pain, and less energy utilization, gets altered. So now literally you are fooling your system here. So that's why the pleasure zone. The pleasure you're getting from eating healthy food is not enough. Okay. And that's why we are stuck in the pleasure trap. So again, we'll go back to eating those energy dense foods, because we know somewhere in our brain that will give me more dopamine hit than eating healthy. So that's why when people reach phase four and they try to come up with the pleasure trap, it's very hard for them, because this is a several weeks journey and it takes a long time. And that's why people can't do it. But after the end of this, like before the end of the seminar, I will give you some tips and tricks to actually get away from this phase four and reach phase five. Okay. It's not hard, but one can do it, and I'll talk about it in the next slides. But let's talk about a most important thing. So, as I talked about the hedonic eating, everything, okay, food, emotion, and mood, okay, it's a two-way relationship. We eat food, we eat good food to make us feel good, or and also we eat, and also emotions and moods focus or push us to eat good food. So it can be a two-way direction, two-way relationship. First of all, we have to understand that mood and emotion are totally different concepts. So mood is basically a psychological arousal in the absence of obvious stimulus. Okay, so your mood can be bad or it can be good for a long amount of time. Okay, But emotion is a short-term affective response to a reinforcing stimulus. So somebody gifting you a card, okay, a beautiful birthday card, and you will feel, "Mm, thank you for that." So that's a good emotion. So it is short-term, and it can, and it depends upon what's the stimuli is. And studies have shown that serotonin plays a major role in positive mood and happy feelings, and basically hippocampus is releasing and actually acting on our mood and emotions and releases serotonin. Okay. And also studies have shown that emotions like anger and joy have the strongest influence on appetite and food choice. So you have seen you make always food choices that are mostly energy dense foods when you are very angry or emotional or very happy, right? So that's how it all plays in. It's a two-way relationship. Okay. Now I will talk about how good food, especially nutrient dense foods, actually leads to good mood. Okay. So as you can see, when you eat nutrient dense foods like fruits, vegetables, which are rich in antioxidants and micronutrients, and nuts and fish, which are rich in omega-3 fatty acids, there's an increase of BDNF levels. So BDNF is a protein known as brain-derived neurotrophic factor. The levels of BDNF levels increases in our brains, and that actually makes us feel good. So these foods, though they are low in calorie per bite, but have a great impact in our mood. Okay, like they will make you feel relaxed. You won't feel lethargic. You will have energy to do work whole day. Okay, but studies and also researchers have seen that people mostly make food choices which are energy dense foods when they are stressed or emotional. So when you are stressed or emotional, our body motivates to eat more energy dense foods with a thought that it will make us feel good. So when we start eating energy dense foods like fried foods or more calorie per bite food, there's actually a rise in our cortisol levels. Okay, there will be great rise in our cortisol levels, and after a point, we will actually feel anxious, and that anxiety will make us eat more of the comfort food. Okay, so this is like a vicious circle that we are trapped in, and later on, this causes mood disorders. So in mood disorders, basically what happens, the BDNF levels are really low, and that's why we are prone to depression or anxiety issues. So now we can see that actually foods play a major role in determining our mood and emotion. So it's upon us to make the correct choice to keep our mood good, right? So now I will talk about some tricks and takeaways. Okay, so first of all, we have to understand that moderation is the key. Okay, you don't have to just eat totally nutrient dense food. You can always keep a balanced diet. You can include both to keep your mind to, so you're eating also for pleasure and also for the calorie. Okay, so it should be a balanced diet meal. There's another trick that you guys can do if you know if you're hedonic eater and you're trapped in the stair trap is water diet for 24 hours. So first of all, it cleanses your system, and also the taste buds get sensitive to whole natural food. So if you are drinking water for a long time, like for 24 hours, and when you go for your dinner and have some normal whole natural foods, your taste buds are very sensitive that time. So even the whole natural foods will give you that amount of pleasure that your system wants. So it has been said that, you know, keeping your system in deprivation is a great way to recover sensitivity to normal food. Okay, normal natural whole food. Also, always try to have natural juices, basically cold pressed juice if you want, because Tetra Pak juices are high in added sugars, and sugar has been found to, you know, increase the dopamine levels, and also it makes you an addictive eater. So it's good to have natural juice. And also you can, as I said, you can make hedonic and homeostatic eating a one thing. You can mix them both up. So for example, if you want to have pancake, have pancake made up of oats. Okay, so oats are high in dietary fiber. It's also good for your gut health and brain. So that's how you can keep a balance. And also there are sources and guidance that will help people to come out of this pleasure trap, like truenorthealth.com, drmcdougall.com. Also, there's Dr. Bernard's group, which is founder of PCMR, which is Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. So this center provides primary health and emphasizes diet and preventive medicine. So they are actually working on providing people with primary care and also giving them guidance. And also there's Dr. T. Colin Campbell, who is an American biochemist, and he has specialization in the effect of nutrition on long-term health. So there are people, there are sources, there are websites who are out there to help you, to guide you, and to make correct food choices, and to give you a way to live a long life. So thank you guys. That's it. That was my presentation. And I hope you like it. I'll share.
Very good, Ria. That was so very interesting. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, especially all those tips and tricks to help us get to that phase 5 of the pleasure trap. So very interesting. So as Ria said, if you have any questions, now is the time. Please go ahead and type them in the chat box, if you will, and we will definitely try to answer those before we leave today. As well, I'm also going to go ahead and put in the chat box just a link to a survey. Certainly your feedback is really incredibly valuable to us. And so we would really love to hear from you about kind of also just what topics you'd like to learn more about. So, so please go ahead and take the time, if you will, to fill that out. Okay, it looks like we've got a couple of questions coming in, Ria. Can you expand more on the water diet? Are there any reasons that you might not choose to do that, like other medical conditions?
Yeah, so if you know that you have some other medical conditions, then I would like to say that not to do water diet. But water diet is basically, it is said that how psychologists think that if you deprive your system with those foods that can actually hit your dopamine circuitry, that makes your taste buds very sensitive after a point. So if you're not eating those foods for a longer time, the taste buds get sensitive, and even the eating a normal natural food will give you that amount of pleasure that you were actually getting from those energy dense food. So having water will actually make you feel full, keep you feel full, and also you can die down your cravings. So that's why psychologists talk about water diet, but it's not totally recommended. If you want to do it, you can do it. But yeah, so that's how it works.
Okay, very good. We have another question. Can we go back to the hypothalamus, lateral and medial?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can show you that. Sorry for sorry, there are so many transitions. Yeah. So basically when I talked about that the food intake is actually regulated in our system. So hypothalamus is the main brain region that is actually helping regulation of a food intake. But there are parts of hypothalamus which plays together like a symphony to regulate it. So I just went in deeper down to give you guys a gist of it. So obviously hypothalamus has its own parts, small parts. So first part is the ventromedial nucleus, okay, which as you can see in the picture is present here, like a small peanut-like shape region. So that is actually the satiety center. It gives you a feeling of sensation of fullness, okay. And also the LHS, known as the lateral hypothalamic area, is a sensation of hunger. Okay, so studies have shown that in mice models, if they ablate, like if they remove the VML from the brain region, the mice keeps eating and eating because it doesn't have the response. The satiety center is not working. So they will keep eating, they will become obese, and at one point they will die. And also The last one, which is the arcuate nucleus, it's like a switchboard. So it is actually managing both the VML and the LHA. Okay. So it's regulating feed center, and the satiety center. So that's how it works. And all three of them are very important. If none of them is working, it will cause problem in our energy homeostasis.
Okay, great. What are your thoughts on intermittent fasting? Because that really does seem to be kind of a popular diet here lately.
Yeah. So I have never done it, to be honest, but I've seen that people have got result. And yeah, as I said, it's a fasting, right? So actually you are making your body deprived. You are letting your body system to go through a process of deprivation. So I would say intermittent fasting is a good option, but actually it depends on the individual's physiological state, and also if they have any other problems, then they should consider all that and go for fasting. Just don't do fasting because you are seeing on the net or people are doing it. You should understand your own body. You should listen to your own body and then make choices. That's what I think.
Okay. And could you repeat the components of the motivational triad?
Oh, okay. So I can say, so motivational triad, I will go. Okay, sorry. So every biological organism that is present in the earth runs their system based on these three components, which is gaining pleasure. We will always go for something that gives us pleasure. Second is to avoid pain. Obviously, our brain has been designed in a way that will make us to avoid pain. And also the last is how we can conserve our energy and do a task with less effort. So every biological being on this earth will make a choice and will be motivated based on these three factors, whatever it is.
Very good. Well, these have been great questions. If you would like to listen to the recording of this session or any of the first 5 sessions, there is a link in the chat box there that you'll be able to click on that to go there to find those recordings. And we should have this one up and ready to go and transcribed here in the next couple of weeks. So that will be ready for you if you would like to go back and listen to this session. I think I've made it through all of the questions, but certainly if you have any more, now is your chance to type that in the chat box. And certainly here too, as Ria has put it up here, we definitely want to hear from you. And so Ria, I'll let you kind of explain to here about your QR code.
Okay, so obviously, we want to hear from you and we strive to provide you up-to-date evidence based on topics we want to learn about. So you guys can go forward and you can scan the QR code with a smartphone camera to complete our survey for this week's session. This survey will take only a few minutes. So I recommend you guys and suggest you guys should do this and make us know like what you guys think about this session.
Very good. Okay, very good. And we also have a link to the evaluation as well in the chat box. So you could please fill that out. We definitely appreciate that. So thank you so much for participating in today's session. This does conclude our Springtime Science series of 2022. So we would really like to thank our presenters, our mentors, and audience for making this series possible. We definitely look forward to seeing you in the future. So thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.